A Viking expedition from Toronto in Canada to New York in the USA over the course of 13 days is the focus of this video. I went on a press trip in April 2024, starting off in Toronto, and then we sailed up and out into the St Lawrence Gulf and then down towards New York. And I'm going to take you through each of our stops on the way and tell you about some of the excursions which we went on. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you the most amazing part of the trip for me personally. So make sure you wait around until the end to see that. We flew from London Heathrow to Toronto and we arrived early evening, so the first night we simply went for dinner on the ship and then got up early the next morning to go on our first excursion. Located on the northern shore of Lake Ontario, Toronto is the largest city and it's the most populated city too in Canada. It's also the capital of Ontario. Its top sightseeing places is the CN Tower, which for over 30 years was the tallest building in the world. After lunch on the ship, we then had our first Zodiac trip, which was so exhilarating. We were really fortunate that it was zooming around past the skyline of Toronto and so much fun. The next day was a sea day the whole day, and we went through lots of locks on the St Lawrence Seaway from Lake Ontario all the way up to our next stop. And our next stop was Trois-Rivières, and we went on a culinary tour. We sampled lots of delicious local favourites in bars and gastropubs and a little sushi restaurant as well. Overnight we sailed to Quebec City, and I was really lucky that I happened to capture as we were sailing in to the city, and at that point the sun was shining and it looked so beautiful. Our first trip that day was to a Huron-Wendat village just outside of Quebec City. Then in the afternoon, we had a guided tour around Quebec City's Old Town, and then we took a short coach ride to Montmorency Falls, which are absolutely stunning. Overnight we carried on sailing, and in the morning we arrived in Saguenay, and I just captured some footage here of us sailing up the Saguenay Fjord. On our excursion that day, we went to a vineyard which specialises in blueberries. It's called Domaine Le Cajot, and we were given some very delicious blueberry pie to taste. Then we headed to the Fjord Distillery, where they make lots of different varieties of gin, and we were shown how the gin is made, and also we had some tastings too. Our next stop was St Île, and that's where we went to learn a little bit about the history and the trading, the fur trade which used to happen back in colonial days. Prince Edward Island was our next port of call, and I'd say it's one of my favourite places that we visited. I just loved the beautiful architecture and the wooden clad buildings in lots of different colours. And my idea of heaven was going on a walking tour in Charlottetown on Prince Edward Island. And we were taken around by a photographer from the area, and we could capture the beauty of this lovely town. We also had some very delicious ice cream, which they're well known for. Crazy me, it was -9 with wind chill, but I just had to have some of their ice cream. Halifax in Nova Scotia was our next stop, and that's where in the morning we went on a hike to Pennant Point, and the scenery was absolutely stunning. We walked past 3 beaches which were basically white sand and turquoise seas, and that was another highlight of the trip. We saw a porcupine, but it scuttled away so quickly I didn't get a chance to capture it on my camera. In the afternoon, we had a little trip out on a special operations boat. Viking has 2 on each of the expedition ships, and they are quite luxurious and when you sit back in the seats. So that was really fun, having a tour around the local area and seeing wildlife, lots of different types of birds we saw, and yeah, it's a really nice way to end that part of our trip before we sailed the next day, and then the following day arrived in the highlight of my trip. On our final day, my alarm was set for 4:45 in the morning. Half an hour later, I was up on deck, and what a sight it was to behold as we sailed into New York, and the weather couldn't have been kinder to us. It was really misty and the sky was sort of a pinky purpley, and yeah, it was absolutely breathtaking. It's a moment I will never ever forget, and I've captured as much footage as I could, but I also wanted to just be in the moment and enjoy it felt quite surreal experience of sailing into New York. I'd only been there once before, about 7 years ago on my 50th birthday. So to come back to New York was really special. And then during the day, we had 6 hours to while away before we had to get our coach to JFK Airport, and we really made the most of it. So we went for a walk around the High Line first of all, and it was such a stunning day. It was about 28 degrees lunchtime, it was about 28 degrees. So we'd gone from -9 to 28 degrees, crazy, but yeah, it was so nice to have some warmth. Then we went to the little island, which is another lovely green open space right by the water. And then we popped into Chelsea Market, grabbed some lunch in Jack's wife Frida, and then we made our way to JFK Airport and flew back to the UK overnight. I absolutely loved the whole expedition. I loved the contrasts between being in a rural environment to then a very urban environment, for example, New York. I also loved the fact we sailed not only on a lake, so Lake Ontario, but also a river up the St Lawrence Seaway and then the Atlantic Ocean down back to New York. And I loved the weather extremes from -9 to about 28 degrees. So yeah, we had to make sure we packed the right things and the right clothes. So yeah, an amazing, amazing trip. Viking are sailing this trip in August this year. They're doing from Toronto to New York and the other way around as well, from New York to Toronto. And then they're doing it again in April 2025 and April 2026. I'll put links to everything below. If you'd like to know more about Viking and you're thinking about going on one of their ocean cruises, I'll put a link to a video that's on the screen now where you can find out all about Viking Ocean and their ship Viking Mars.